to Bibliophiles Anonymous, episode 43. I'm Denise.
And I'm Jess.
And welcome to the finale of Harry Potter-palooza.
Yay!
I don't really have a whole lot to do to celebrate the finale, but we're going to be talking about Deathly Hallows, so that's a pretty big thing. It's a pretty big book.
True. Although not the biggest book in the series.
Also true. No, oh gosh, there is so much stuff that happens in this book. This is another episode where we're only talking about one book, but it's going to take us forever to do it.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing about it was, when they were doing the movies, I was like, okay, they cut a lot of stuff out of all the other books. Stuff that wasn't necessary for the plot, and I'm like, they can't do that here. All of this stuff is important.
Yeah. And well, the thing is, too, is there were so many... I mean, the last book in the series, you always have to worry about tying up the loose ends. Because, especially with something that has as much publicity and as much popularity as this book, you know that if there's a loose end that didn't get tied up, people were going to talk about it. But
people are going to pounce on it.
But then you take the movies, and there were so many beginnings of loose ends that they didn't even include in the earlier movies, and then all of a sudden you get to the final one. Now, granted, the last book wasn't even written when they started, so some of it they can get a pass on because they didn't realize certain things were going to be as important as what they were. But
they've got J.K. Rowling. They can be like, hey.
Right.
What?
Well, no,
we need to touch on this.
She did. I do remember one thing in particular. It was in, Prisoner of Azkaban, I guess it has to be, where they were going to cut out Creature, and she went up to them and said, "You can't do that. Just don't cut out Creature, because I need him."
Yeah, he's quite important.
And, well, then, of course, they cut out most of his backstory, but, whatever.
Yeah, at least, they completely cut most of Dobby's stuff out of every book except the first one he appeared in.
Well, he was only in 2 movies. He was in Chamber of Secrets, of course, and then he was in this one. I don't think he was in any of the others, was he?
No, but he was in the book.
Of course he was. He was all over the books.
Yeah, and they cut all of that out of the movies.
Yeah. Oh, well.
We don't need Dobby. He can just show back up in the last one.
Yeah, okay.
And,
that's not random.
No. Of course, I can kind of understand it, because without Hermione's whole spew thing...
Yeah, it didn't seem as important.
Including Dobby didn't make as much sense, because you also didn't have Winky.
Right.
So, I mean, I can kind of understand it, but at the same time, it's like, no, I want more Dobby.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand it, but that doesn't mean I have to like it.
We say that a lot.
That's true. We do say that a lot. Oh, well. I guess we'll have to wait, a couple more decades, and then eventually they'll decide they want to remake the Harry Potter movies, and maybe they'll do things differently now that they know what didn't happen last time. We can always hope.
Now that they've heard all of the fans' complaints about the way they did the first one?
Yeah. Well, before we start talking about Deathly Hallows, is there any other books you wanted to talk about that you've been reading?
Well, I finished Charming, so there'll be a review of that up in a few weeks. It was really, really good, and I'm in love with John Charming. I want one.
Oh, you're funny.
If this is definitely, if urban fantasy, supernatural type stuff is your thing, you definitely need to look for this when it comes out. It's really, really good. But I don't want to say too much, because, there's a whole review coming of it soon. And I started Clockwork Heart, because that's the next book we're discussing on the podcast.
Right.
Which I've only read, the first few pages, so I really can't say much about it yet. And I finished Deathly Hallows. And I have a Janet Ivanovich book that I need to start and read, because it belongs to my aunt, and I'm sure she wants it back at some point.
Yeah, most of my reading has just been taken up by Deathly Hallows. I've been really trying to focus on getting that one finished. And actually said on, it was either on my blog or on Twitter or something, it's like, now I've finished the Harry Potter books, I don't know what to do with my time.
Yeah. You said something about not having anything to read. How can that be possible?
Yeah, I've been so focused on these books, it's like, it was hard for me to think of what was going to come next, and I didn't have to worry about it for a while. And so, but let's see, I did do a couple of kind of easy rereads throughout the week. One was Paper Towns by John Green. And I love that book so much. It's so funny and bittersweet, and just, I think I've talked about it on the show before, so I'm not going to go into it again. So I finished that, and then I started, last night, I started reading 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. And that's another one that's really, it's cute and funny, but a little bit sad at the same time. And it's basically about a girl whose aunt has died and left behind this kind of almost like scavenger hunt through Europe. And so she's traveling kind of through Europe and she left these 13 little blue envelopes, and she has to read the letter and do something and then go somewhere. And she's left her money to do this too, but not very much, so she has to get creative. And she was only allowed to bring like one backpack full of stuff, so that was it. But
I wish someone could do that for
I know,
me.
seriously. But it's a really cute book, and I really enjoy it. And I also enjoy Maureen Johnson, so I think I've mentioned her a time or two, or five.
She's a fun person to follow on Twitter.
She's hilarious on Twitter. Yeah, she lives on Twitter. She's the first one to say that. But, we should also mention that there is a new book review up on our website.
Yes, I did finally post the review of Artifact.
Yes, so that is up, and it sounds like you really enjoyed it.
It was good. Normally in books like that, if I can figure out what's going on, they bore me. But the only part of that one I figured out was that, when she saw the shoes that reminded her of her supposedly dead ex-boyfriend, I was like, yeah, that's him. That's too obvious not to be him. But the rest of it kept me guessing, and it was really good. And it's definitely a series that I will have to pursue.
Okay, good to know. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into our discussion because, so much stuff happens in this book. So much.
All of the Harry Potter feels.
Oh, yeah. And I will say, I don't know what it is, but I have really enjoyed this past time doing the reread. Maybe it's just because I haven't read these books in so long, but, I finished this book and there was just kind of that sense like, oh, okay, it's over. And, which is ridiculous, because I can go back and read them all again, but, it's so funny.
It's like the first time I finished it. I was happy. I loved the way she ended it. I loved the way she wrapped it up. But at the same time, I was so sad because it's like, there's going to be no more Harry Potter.
That's it. It's over.
It's all gone.
And I do have to say one thing, because one thing that I really enjoyed reading this time, and I think I've mentioned it before, but there's a website that I follow pretty regularly, and it's called markreads.net.
Yes. And
one of the things that really made this guy Mark kind of famous, or internet famous anyway, was when he did his read-through of the Harry Potter series. And he posts a blog post per chapter. And the thing that was funny is because he's, I guess in his late 20s or so. I mean, so he's not like a kid. And he had never read them and had, for the most part, remained completely spoiler-free. And I don't know exactly how he did that, but...
Did he live in a vacuum?
I guess. I don't know. But he hadn't really paid attention because he had written them all off as being just kids' books. Which...
A lot of people made that mistake.
Yeah, and so he started off, he got a following because somebody told him to read the Twilight books. And so he started doing his reading thing. I don't know if Twilight was the first thing that he did, but it was the first thing that really got a lot of attention. And oh my gosh, his Twilight posts are hilarious because he hates that book series so much. He despises it with every fiber of his being, and it is hilarious. But the Harry Potter books, he started out, he was getting ready to be dismissive and sarcastic, and then all of a sudden it just completely took over his life and was bringing up all of these memories of his childhood, and he just had this really deep connection. So when I went back in and read these books, for every single one of them, I would pull up his website at either on my computer or on my Kindle or even on my my phone, and I'd read a chapter, and then I'd read his post, and then I'd read a chapter, and I'd just keep like clicking forward. And it was really fun to do that because you got to kind of experience it through the eyes of somebody who was reading it for the first time. And because, I mean, I've read them so many times, you can't really surprise me anymore. Even although there were a couple things that I had forgotten because, like I said, it had been a while. But it was kind of neat seeing somebody else just freak out when something would happen. And several, all caps rants about various characters. I'm pretty sure that Dolores Umbridge got a pretty good, probably several rants. And
didn't she from all of us?
But he's really funny and snarky and sweet, and he's I'm gonna leave a link to his Harry Potter posts in our show notes because it's just a lot of fun to read it with somebody who's experiencing it for the first time, and especially someone who was completely ready to discount it and then was completely proven wrong and so excited to be proven wrong.
Well, I remember when I think it was the first 3 maybe were out.
Mm-hmm.
4. Peregrine from the tavern was very dismissive of them. He's like, they can't be that great. There's too much hype. They can't possibly live up to the hype. And I'm like, yes, they do.
There's very few things in this world that actually do live up to the hype, but this is one of them.
And I remember I was trying for so long to convince him. I'm like, you have to read these. Seriously, you have to. Finally, he gave in and started reading them. And you kind of have to know Peregrine and know what kind of person he is. After he started reading the books, just because he wanted to, he started writing a characterization essay of Harry Potter.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he loved them. I mean, once he started reading them, he's like, okay, they're good. I'm like,
yes, they are, actually.
I'm like, they actually live up to their hype. Twilight, not so much. I mean, the hype is the reason I read Twilight. I remember seeing all this stuff on Facebook, and that was back when the Pieces of Flair application actually worked like it was supposed to. And there was all this flair on there about Team Jacob and Team Edward and Twilight and Bella and all. I'm like, what is? Okay, I have to figure out what all this is.
Right.
And I found out it was a book series, and I was like, okay, I gotta read it just to see. And I mean, I enjoyed the books, but I didn't love them.
Yeah, I was the same way. I mean, I was okay with them. I've read them a couple times actually. It's something when you don't need to. This is gonna sound bad. It's something to read when you don't need to use your brain.
Yeah.
And that sounds bad, but I'm sorry.
Well, I've still got my copies, and that's one of the things that I do need to reread, because if I reread them and I still have this whole, they're really not as great as everybody thought, I'm probably going to just trade them off. But anyway, we're digressing.
We're completely digressing. Harry Potter.
Harry Potter actually lives up to the top.
It does.
I said, and like I said, once I convinced him to read them, he was like, okay, they do, and I want to write this essay, characterization essay of Harry Potter. I need to ask him if he ever finished that.
All right, well, I have to say that when I first got this book, my husband, who was not my husband at the time, we had gone to the midnight party and got our books. Well, he got his book because I had ordered mine from Amazon, so I was waiting for mine to arrive in the mail the next day. But we were driving all over the place while I'm sitting there trying to read in the dark and not get carsick. And I start reading the first chapter out loud so that he's driving and I'm reading and we're both trying to follow it. But we ended up sitting up until like 2:30 in the morning, just like reading together and making sure that we could turn the page at the same time. So that's part of why I love this book, because it's just, nice warm memories. But I will say that the first chapter is one of the creepiest things I've ever read. It takes place at Malfoy Manor, and that's kind of a Death Eater home base, sort of. And Voldemort's there. And Snape shows up with another Death Eater, Yaxley, I think it is. And they're talking about the plans that the Order has for moving Harry Potter from his aunt and uncle's house to another safe house somewhere. the entire time this whole conversation is going on. Now, they're talking about a whole bunch of other things. They're talking about the way that they've kind of infiltrated the ministry. They're talking about Voldemort needing to use somebody else's wand. He ends up taking Lucius Malfoy's wand. The whole time they're having this conversation, there is a body suspended in midair above the table.
Yeah.
Ah! That's so creepy.
Well, not really a body. At that point, she's still alive.
Well, I mean, yeah, but she's still a body. And she's kind of unconscious. And that whole visual, and I think that they did that very well in the movie, too, because, that was just bad. I mean, in a good way, but bad. And you find out that that's Charity Burbage, who is the Muggle Studies teacher at Hogwarts. And, yeah, she's not long for this world. Mm-mm. So, but that whole opening scene, it's like, this entire book, the other books, you always had, even though there were some dark things, you always had, they're going to Hogwarts and they're going to do all these things and there's going to be some fun. But this one opens and all of a sudden you realize it is a completely different animal from everything else that has come before it.
Well, we already know that Harry has decided not to go back to Hogwarts.
Right.
He kind of declared that at the end of the last book. He's not going back. He's going to hunt down Horcruxes, do what Dumbledore wanted him to do. So we already know, or suspect anyway, that we're not going to be at Hogwarts.
Right.
There's going to be no warm and fuzzy in this book.
Right, and there's not a lot. I mean, this book is just full of non-stop dread that's broken up every so often by something, but there's a lot of things going on, but there's this foreboding atmosphere throughout the entire thing. And just from the way the last book ended, especially with Dumbledore's death, nobody is safe. And I remember that there was so much speculation. I mean, there were like betting websites that had odds on the survival of various characters. It was like 10-1 Ron was going to die, and Hermione or Hagrid or, everybody was listed. And it was something that was just, you knew that she wasn't going to pull any punches with this. This wasn't going to be like some watered down kiddie version of a war. This was the real thing. And it was going to be hard, it was going to be tough, and that people were going to die. And actually, I think J.K. Rowling said in an interview that it was going to be a bloodbath. And I was like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, she said that somebody sort of central was going to die.
Yeah.
But when we do get to Harry, they have this big plan to move him where they've made a bunch of people drink Polyjuice Potion and turn into Harry.
Well, they were trying to make sure that his family, his aunt and uncle, and the Dursleys, that they weren't going to be in danger. And it does lead to a kind of a sweet little moment when Harry and Dudley kind of reconcile, sort of.
Yeah, Dudley thanks him.
For saving his life. It's like, well, it's about time. So
you have hope that Dudley may not turn out to be quite the horrid muggle that his parents are. But
yes, the 7 Potters.
I love in the movie when they changed, and one of the girls that turned into a Harry, they were showing them change clothes, and you've got Daniel Radcliffe standing there with Rolf.
That was Fleur, I think.
It was so funny.
Yeah, that was really funny. And it was actually really funny. For some reason I've been watching a lot of like little behind the scenes videos and things about the Harry Potter movies, because I still haven't had a chance to watch any of the movies. I haven't had the time. And so they had bloopers, I guess, and one of them was during that scene when they were filming, because they had to keep filming Daniel Radcliffe over and over, being different characters, and he had to pretend to be other people. And so there was a couple of takes where he was trying to do that, and he couldn't get the bra off. He's like, nope, it's stuck. And then they had to try and figure out why, what got caught in the wrong place. And all right, let's try it again. And he has to get dressed again. It was funny. But that scene, and I think they did a really good job in the movie with the way that they had everybody change, and just the way that it looked. I mean, the visual you got reading the book, it just sounded so ridiculous that there was going to be 7 of them. I mean, we've seen them use Polyjuice Potion to have, you know, 1 extra person, but 7?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I love in the book where Hermione tells Harry she tastes loads better than somebody.
Yeah, the Crab or Goyle or one of them.
Yeah.
Or he looked tastier.
Look, yeah, you look much tastier.
Well, he probably does.
Well, you know, they said his was a clear, golden, shimmery color.
Instead of looking like boogers.
Yeah, crab and gold like
yeah.
bogies.
But, so, they've made plans so that there's going to be 1 Harry and then 1 protector. And some of them are taking brooms and some of them are riding on thestrals. And Harry, the real one, is going with Hagrid on the motorcycle.
They have to go this way because they can't use any magical means of transportation like apparition because Harry still has the trace on him. And they can't use, like, the flu network because it's being monitored.
Right. Every kind of ministry transportation, the flu network, port keys, everything like that is being watched. And they can't trust the ministry anymore. They know that it's been infiltrated.
Right.
But they take off, and turns out they were ambushed. Somebody had leaked the plan, and originally the plan had been to move Harry later, and so they were trying to do it early so they could sneak through, and yeah, it didn't work, because they were attacked by Death Eaters as soon as they left.
Yeah. Well, you know, you have that scene at the beginning that you were talking about with the body floating, and you know Snape has told them one date and Yaxley has told them another.
Right.
So you don't know at this point which one of them was actually correct, because you don't know what date it is that the 7 Harrys are leaving.
Right.
But they leave, and, you know, there's this big battle in the sky, and she killed Hedwig.
Yeah.
That made me mad.
That was seriously, again, nobody is safe. The first death in the book is the owl. I mean,
what?
Holy crap.
Killed the owl.
And I have to say, this is something that they changed in the movie slightly, that I actually really liked the movie version better.
Well, the movie version definitely worked better on screen than just Harry's holding Hedwig's cage and boom, she's dead.
Well, yeah, because she was in her cage, and this one of the Avada Kedavra spells missed him, but it hit the cage, and she's dead, and she had no way to move or get away from it, and it just seemed really senseless, and, I mean, and sometimes death is like that. I'm not saying it's not, but in the movie they changed it so that Hedwig was not in a cage. She was flying, and she was actually, like, trying to dive bomb the Death Eaters. And I'm like, yeah, you go, Hedwig. Except then they killed her, but, you know.
Yeah, she was trying to protect Harry.
Which
I
think she would have done had she not been in the cage. You know.
Well, I'm trying to figure out why Harry had her in the cage anyway, because usually when he left, he would set her free.
Yeah, because she liked flying, and it's not like she couldn't find him where they were going. She always can find him. She's like the smartest owl to ever live.
Right. You know, all he had to do was tell her. And plus, you know, that's kind of how the owl post works. You don't have to know where somebody is for an owl to find them.
That's what makes them magic owls.
How many letters did Harry send to Sirius not knowing where Sirius was?
A lot.
So, I mean, you know, it doesn't matter. He should have turned her loose in the book.
Yeah. But it's just pure chaos. There's Death Eaters everywhere. Voldemort himself shows up. Harry gets away again, though, because his wand does something really, really strange and does some kind of spell that he's never even heard of, much less ever performed. But there's so much going on that it's even hard to pay attention to that small fact. But they eventually get to one of the safe houses. They were all going to go to different places, and they were going to all reconvene at the Burrow. Right. So now Hagrid has also been hit by something, and he's not talking, not moving, not driving the motorcycle anymore, which is kind of scary. So for a good part of the chapter, we don't know whether Hagrid's still alive. I mean, you would think that it would take a lot to actually kill him, but he's not responding to anything, and you find out later that he's okay, and Harry's okay. They actually end up at Tonks's parents' house, and then they take a portkey over to the Burrow. And once you get to the Burrow, you find out that Mad-Eye Moody has been killed. And the thing is, with that chapter, if you're just looking at the chapter titles, because her chapter titles are always pretty good, chapter 5 is called Fallen Warrior. And just seeing that title, you're like, oh god, which one is it?
Yeah.
So thanks for giving us a panic attack there, J.K. Rowling. But it was Mad-Eye. And you also find out that George had gotten his ear cut off, which, okay,
Yeah.
ow. But he's okay. It's alright. He has a fine sense of humor about it. He's holy, because he has a hole in his ear. But then they're getting ready for Bill and Fleur's wedding. And it's funny because Mrs. Weasley, oh, I love Mrs. Weasley. She's such a sweetheart. And at the same time, can be really annoying when she wants to be. She knows that Harry was talking about not going back to school, and that Ron was also talking about going with Harry, and she's not real thrilled with the idea.
No.
So she tries to keep them apart as much as possible so that they can't plan anything by giving them all kinds of crazy things that they have to do, all kinds of chores, and there's always something that needs to be done because they're planning this big wedding. But one of my favorite character building moments happens when they're able to find just a handful of moments where they can sit down and actually plan things and try and decide when they're leaving and what they're taking with them and all that sort of thing. And Harry tries to do his thing where he wants to go alone. He doesn't want anybody else to be in danger and all this other stuff. Like that's going to work, okay? Yeah. That's not going to work. This is Ron and Hermione you're talking to. They're coming with you whether you want them to or not. And you find out just how serious they are about it because Hermione tells him what she did to make sure that she could leave. And it absolutely broke my heart because she basically packed up everything and altered the memories of her parents. Made them think that they were different people with different names and that they had always wanted to live in Australia, and since they had no children, because she removed the memory they had of her, she removed that and basically gave them the idea to move to Australia. So her parents are now, way far away in another country where they'll be safe. And she said, basically, if anything ever happens to me, well, they'll be happy in Australia and they won't even remember they had a daughter, so they'll be fine. Heartbreaking. I mean, it's really a testament to her character and how much faith she had in Harry and in Dumbledore and in the whole plan of fighting against the Death Eaters and against Voldemort. But, oh my gosh, even just thinking about it right now, I'm still like getting goosebumps.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another thing, too, that they changed in the movie. Instead of having her tell them that she did that, They showed it.
Yeah. And it was really powerful the way they did it, too. The way that all of the pictures, like, on the mantelpiece were changed and, like, she was removed from them. It's like she doesn't exist to them anymore. So if anything happens to her, they're not going to be sad. They're going to be perfectly fine because they don't know she was ever there. And it's just, oh my gosh, how can you do that? How can you have the strength to do that? That's just unbelievable. She's a better person than I am.
For real.
And Ron also has kind of a safeguard in there. They have a family ghoul that lives in the attic. And they've basically made him look like what Ron would look like if he had a spattergroit, just some sort of wizarding illness. So when he doesn't turn up at Hogwarts, they'll just explain that he's really, really sick, and if any of the Ministry comes around looking for him, they'll say, look, there he is. And I loved how he said the ghoul's actually kind of excited about it. He's really looking forward to living in my bedroom.
And it makes you wonder exactly what spattergroit is.
If it makes you look like a ghoul, I don't want it.
No.
Because apparently it also makes you smell bad, too, because, oof. But moving on, they get a visit from the new minister. Well, he was the minister in the next book, too, but he always seems like the new one, because I was always so used to Fudge. But Scrimgeour comes to visit, and says that, Dumbledore had a will, and he left something to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And Ron got the Deluminator, which is also called the Putter-Outer.
Yeah, and they were all sort of gobsmacked by the whole thing.
Yeah, because especially Ron and Hermione, they were like, we didn't really know him that well, but okay. And Hermione got a copy, an old copy of the Tales of Beetle the Bard, which was basically wizarding fairy tales, children's stories.
Yeah.
And Harry got the snitch that he caught in the first game of Quidditch that he played.
Yeah.
Which they think, well, Scrimgeour suspects that Dumbledore had hidden something inside the snitch, but when it doesn't open once Harry touches it, he kind of gets pouty.
Yeah, he wasn't real happy about that. He was so convinced that it's because snitches have flesh memories, which basically means that in a case where a catch is disputed, a snitch remembers which hand touched it first. It's never touched with skin until, it's caught by the secret.
Right.
So Scrimgeour was convinced that it was going to open when Potter touched it. The only problem is Harry didn't catch that first snitch with his hand.
Nope. He almost swallowed it.
Yep. So it didn't remember his touch of his hand.
But he tries to put it on his mouth, and it doesn't work either. So he's kind of flummoxed with it. But the wedding goes on, and it's a beautiful wedding. Everybody's for a time everybody's happy and it's all lovely until a Patronus shows up, and it's Kingsley's, and it basically says the Ministry has fallen, Scrimgeour is dead, they are coming.
Yeah.
And then things really get going. I mean, it's sheer chaos. You have people apparating in, you have party guests that are apparating out. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are trying to find one another, and then finally they meet back up, and they are able to apparate out of there. And let's see, where did they go?
Tottenham Court Road.
Oh, right. And that was Hermione's idea. She was trying to think of some place that was crowded and in the Muggle world so that it wouldn't be as easy to find them. And turns out Hermione has been planning this for weeks. And she just had a feeling that it was going to be coming sooner rather than later, that they were going to have to leave. So she had this, I think it's an undetectable expanding charm that she put on this little tiny purse, and she has packed everything you could possibly think of in there, including a tent and several changes of clothes and a whole big stack of books that she knocks over.
Yeah, because she had sorted by subject.
Yeah. I love her. She's one of our people. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, she is.
But
she
had packed everything in this little purse, and she just kept it with her the whole time because she expected that it was going to happen. It was going to happen soon. So they are able to change clothes, and they go to a little coffee shop, and they're trying to decide what they're going to do next. And they get ambushed by 2 Death Eaters, and they can't figure out how the Death Eaters found them, but they don't have time really to worry about that. They need some place where they can regroup and try and figure out what to do, and they decide to go to Grimmauld Place.
I want to live at Grimmauld Place.
Really? I don't.
Well, if I could find out how to get those permanent sticking charms off of some of the things that are stuck to the wall there.
Yeah.
Like Mrs. Black's portrait in the hallway.
Can we get rid of the house elf heads on the wall?
Yeah.
That's just gross.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy. I mean, I don't mind Sirius's bedroom with Gryffindor stuff permanently stuck everywhere.
That's fine.
Because, I'm a Gryffindor.
But let's see. They're going through and they're trying to figure out what to do because they have the fake locket. And I can't remember exactly how it happens, but they remember that there was a locket among the stuff that they threw out when they were cleaning Grimmauld Place when Sirius was there. So they summon Creature and ask him if he remembers anything about a locket. And Creature's like, yes, it was stolen by Mundungus Fletcher.
Mundungus is a git.
Yes, he is. But Creature also tells them how they ended up with the locket. And this is also where they find out who RAB was. And
Yes.
it was Regulus Black.
Sirius's
Sirius's
brother.
brother.
And Harry has this conclusion as he's walking up the landing and he sees this bedroom with a plaque on the door that says Regulus Arcturus Black, and he's like, oh my god, it's RAB.
Oh, yeah. And Creature was actually a big part of Regulus being able to get the locket and find it. And he witnessed Regulus drowning in the lake with the Inferi, which is a horrible way to die. And he is sent to go and find Mundungus, which he does. And Dung's not very happy about being attacked by a house elf, but I really didn't care at this point.
No.
And he tells them that the locket, he had the locket, but it was taken from him by a lady who works at the ministry. Kind of short, looks like a toad.
Guess who?
And I remember the first time I read this, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I thought we got rid of her.
I mean, I thought she was going to be in therapy for years and years and years because of being attacked by centaurs, but apparently not. She's fine now.
Well, as fine as she gets, it is Umbridge.
Yeah.
She wasn't fine to start with.
But anyway, so they come up with this really elaborate plan because they have to break into the ministry and get the locket back. And their plan is to try and find some of the ministry employees and use Polyjuice Potion to take on their appearance and basically just get in there. And that was the extent of their plan. They didn't have a plan for, say, if they got separated or if they needed to get out of there in a hurry. They didn't have any of those plans. But
no,
this,
who needs
not really. But this, I got to tell you, this is another part in the movie that I just loved it. The whole ministry part. I thought that the three actors that they got to play the polyjuiced Harry, Ron, and Hermione were so good. I mean, literally, you're sitting there and you forget that that's not them. Because they copied their mannerisms and everything so perfectly.
Yeah.
It was really, really good. I was really pleased with that. But they do get in and they do get separated. Ron is sent, I guess he's a maintenance man, and he gets sent to fix, actually it's Yaxley's office because it's raining in his office.
Yes, it will stop raining.
And then apparently Harry's person is somebody to be reckoned with because everybody kind of is very careful around him. But Hermione's person is somebody that Umbridge knows, and when they run into her, she was like, oh yes, you can come and help me. And Hermione's like, okay. And
they didn't bargain on that.
No, and they didn't bargain on a lot of things.
This is
I mean,
true.
there is one part I remember in the movie, and I can't remember exactly when it was, when they're trying to come up with a plan to do things, or to do something, and Harry says, when do any of our plans actually work? And that made me laugh. But they find out a lot of really horrible things in the ministry. Basically, the ministry is bringing in Muggle-born witches and wizards and putting them on trial, trying to figure out where they stole their magic from, which is absolutely ridiculous. Magic doesn't work that way. But they're basically using it as a reason to strip Muggle-borns of their wands and of any kind of ministry protection.
Yeah.
And I've heard...
magic doesn't work like that. They're not stupid.
No, but that's what they want to believe. And I've heard a lot of people say that there's a lot of parallels there with Nazi Germany and some of the things that happened during the Holocaust and all that stuff. So, the fact that there's those kind of connections, that's another way that make you know that this is not a kid's book anymore.
Yeah.
Just these little things. And there's a lot of ways as Harry's going through, he has this idea. First he's going to search Umbridge's office, which there's nothing there, but he does find Mad Eye's magical eye, which, okay, seriously? I mean, really?
Apparently.
He takes it, though. And then goes to find Hermione, which he knows where she is because she's down in the same courtroom where he had his hearing. And there's Dementors all over the place. They find out that the lady who's in there is actually the wife of the guy that Ron is impersonating.
Yeah.
Everything gets so complicated.
It really does.
But eventually...
That puts a whole new twist on what they're doing there.
Yeah, and you just realize how innocent they still are, because they just had this thing of like, we'll just be in disguise, we'll walk in, we'll get it, and we'll walk back out. That was the only thought process they had. It's like, no, that's not going to work. But they do finally get the locket, and they do finally get out of there. There's a big old chase scene because, it doesn't quite work the way they want to, and they accidentally bring Yaxley with them to Grimmauld Place, which means they have to abandon Grimmauld Place because he's been brought into the secret.
Yeah.
And he could tell anyone now.
And he can get in now.
So, let's see what happens now. They have the Horcrux. They have no idea how to destroy it. They get an idea that Dumbledore had wanted to leave the Sword of Gryffindor to Harry, but the minister wouldn't let him do it because he said that it wasn't really Dumbledore's to give away. And they get the idea, well, okay, then the sword must be something that can help defeat a Horcrux or can destroy a Horcrux. And they've taken to wearing the necklace to kind of keep tabs on it, and it really affects you really negatively. You get really angry, you get really touchy about certain things, and at the time, Ron had gotten injured when they escaped Grimmauld Place, but he was wearing it, and he was really bad on Ron. And
yeah, it was.
And he goes off on Harry and just says, this is just one more thing we have to find. And we thought you knew what you were doing. We thought that Dumbledore actually told you something, and you have no idea. Which, of course, was in the back of Harry's mind, too. And Ron really wasn't saying anything that wasn't true. But, they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't have any information or really anything to go on. But Ron decides to leave. He's had enough. And he tries to get Hermione to go with him, and Hermione's like, no, I promised that I would help Harry, and Ron, of course, takes that completely the wrong way.
Of course.
And he stomps off and leaves them in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
That was so sad. But I think it was an excellent performance by Rupert Grint in the movie.
It was.
He had some really good moments, because a lot of times in the movies, I think we've mentioned before, that Ron is pretty much nothing but a comic relief, and making him kind of silly. But he had some really good moments in this movie.
And it really annoys me because, while he was kind of silly in the books, they played it up a lot more in the movies than they did.
Yeah.
And it's mostly what annoyed me was the fact that they acted like he was such a doofus and didn't know anything. And I'm like, but he grew up in a wizarding family.
Yeah. He knows things, and it's okay for him to know something that Hermione doesn't know. It's okay.
Yeah. It's okay for him to be able to point something out to Harry and Hermione and be like, that's not how this works. Like him knowing the Beetle the Bard stuff.
Right.
Yeah, Ron got the Deluminator. And Harry got the Snitch, and Hermione got Tales of Beetle the Bard. Which, that would be the thing I wanted.
Of course.
Actually, I kind of want the Deluminator, but that's just because it's cool and there's no such thing, and I really want one.
Right. Well, you can get a copy of the Tales of the Beetle the Bard now.
We'll have that.
So we don't need that one anymore. We can chalk that off the list.
Yeah, but I can't have a Deluminator, so...
Yeah. Oh, well. But, yeah, Ron's gone. And Harry and Hermione decide to go to Godric's Hollow. It's where Harry's family had lived and where his parents died. They had found out that that's where Dumbledore's family was from. And they also had found out that Bathilda Bagshot, who is famous wizarding historian, also lived there and was friends with the Dumbledores and the Potters. So they have this idea that maybe she was given the sword so that she could give it to them. That was part of the reason they wanted to go there.
Right.
And Harry had wanted to go there from the get-go. He wanted to, see his parents' graves. He wanted to see the place where his whole story began. And they decided not to at first because they were afraid that that would be someplace that the Death Eaters would expect him to go, and that it would be dangerous. But they end up polyjuicing themselves and look like just a random Muggle couple. And I'm actually glad that they didn't do that in the movie, because there was a really big emotional scene when they go to the graveyard and they find Lily and James's graves, and it was nice to actually see Harry and Hermione kind of having that moment, as opposed to just two random people that we don't know. Even though it would be them, but it was nice to see, our kids doing that instead of two random actors that we haven't watched for the past, 10 years.
And Harry's logic behind it in the movie made sense. If he was going back, he wanted to go back as himself.
Right.
That was logical.
And it was nice that they kind of addressed that change too. It was like, okay, well, yeah, it's different. We're not using Polyjuice Potion, and this is why. It was a nice little touch there. But they also find another grave that is, they can't read the full name. It looks like the first name is Ignatus, and it has this symbol on it. Hermione had found this same symbol in her copy of the Tales of Beedle the Bard. It was also, we didn't mention this, but Luna Lovegood's dad, Xenophilius, was wearing a necklace that had this symbol on it, and Victor Crumb was at the wedding, and he didn't understand why this man was here wearing Grindelwald's symbol.
Yeah.
And so, Harry and Hermione are both like, if it's Grindelwald's symbol, like the Dark Mark is Voldemort's symbol, what is it doing on this random grave in Godric's Hollow? But they don't really have time to think about it, because they see this old lady, this really old lady, and they think that's Bathilda. So they follow her, they go to her house, and the whole time she's not really talking, and she's acting really weird, and her house is disgusting and really, really filthy dirty and smells, and
not what you would expect for
a fussy little lady.
Or the woman, who wrote A History of Magic.
And this is another scene I think that they did really well in the movie, because it was so creepy and so yucky. But Bathilda kind of gestures that she wants Harry to go upstairs, and so he does, which I wouldn't have. Isn't that like rule number one in like any kind of like scary movie, that you do not go upstairs? You don't go downstairs. Stairs are bad. But he does.
You don't follow creepy old women who don't talk and want you to follow them.
Because hiding inside the creepy old woman is Nagini, the big honking snake. So gross. But yeah, Nagini comes out and she's trying to hold on to Harry, and she's communicating with Voldemort, and Harry knows that Voldemort is on his way, and Hermione runs up there, and somehow they manage to escape. It's, chaos, complete and total chaos. The snake is everywhere, and I think Harry actually gets bitten by it, but she's not poisonous apparently, which surprised me.
Well, actually, she is, because that's how she is. She ends up being later anyway.
Okay.
Because remember, she bites somebody else later on.
Okay.
And kills him.
Oh, well, yeah, but I don't think that was because she was poisonous. I think that was just because of the wound.
Maybe it was.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll get there eventually. Sometime. So they get out of there, and they are back camping again in the middle of nowhere. And you find out a little bit more about Dumbledore. Because Rita Skeeter Yeah,
Can't stand
oh
her.
gosh, she's written another book called
Life and Lies.
Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. And you can just guess by that title what kind of book it is. But she's you learn a little bit about Dumbledore. You knew he had a brother, I think, but you didn't know that he had a sister. And there's this story in the book about how his mother was ashamed of his sister because she was a squib, and so she did everything she could to keep her hidden. She kept her locked up and all this other stuff, which, I mean, just all this horrible stuff you're hearing about Dumbledore's family. And you also find out that Harry's wand got broken during the
Yeah,
snake fight.
which is sad.
Yeah, because one of the things that he was counting on, and he didn't even realize it, but he was counting on the twin wand cores to be something that would help him, and now he doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah. Well, you know, and technically, the twin wand cores wouldn't have helped him anymore anyway, although he didn't know that he had that protection without those twin
Right.
cores. Because apparently it had something to do with, you know, his connection to Voldemort that nobody can explain, even though Dumbledore's been trying to, not so plainly,
Yeah.
for years.
Oh, but let's see. Next up, I'm going through the table of contents so I can try and keep things at least somewhat in order. Um, Next, oh, the silver doe. While they're camping at night and Harry's keeping watch, all of a sudden this silvery doe just comes out of the forest, and it looks like a Patronus, but he doesn't see anybody around that could have cast the Patronus. And he just decides to follow it because, who's ever heard of an evil doe? Nobody.
Yeah.
Does are good. So
Patronus.
so he follows it and finds this little pond that's frozen over because it's probably January about now. Because they were at Godric's Hollow for Christmas. This is like January, February. It's cold. So the pond is frozen over, and he's kind of looking through the ice, and inside, like down at the bottom of the lake, is the sword of Gryffindor.
That's convenient.
How did it get there? Who knows? But Harry decides that the thing to do is to break the ice, take his clothes off, and jump in and get it in the freezing cold. He's braver than I am. Ugh.
Yeah, perfectly logical.
Yeah. So he does this, but there's a problem. He's wearing the Horcrux.
And it tries
The
to kill
Horcrux
him.
doesn't like the idea of there being, the thing that can destroy it right there. And who can blame it, really?
Yeah. Well, and two, the fact that he's wearing this and it suddenly is heavy and pulling him under just made me think of Frodo wearing the ring in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, there's several little connections like that. The Horcrux was very much like the One Ring.
I was just like, that's familiar.
The way that it seems heavier than normal, the way that it affects the people who are around it. Yeah, there's several parallels there. So yeah, the Horcrux is basically trying to strangle and drown him at the same time, and somebody pulls him out of the lake, and it's Ron.
Yay, Ron!
Ron's still an idiot, but he's back, so hey. And they decide that Ron needs to destroy the Horcrux because he was the one who was brave enough to come back and to get the sword, because he got the sword too while he was down there, because, why not? You don't want to have to go into the freezing cold water 2 times, so take care of everything the first time and, save Harry, get the sword.
Hey, makes
check
sense.
everything off your list, and then you can get out of the water. But the Horcrux is really, really devious, and it knows exactly what needs to happen in order to convince Ron to not kill it, basically.
Yeah.
And the Horcrux starts throwing all these things at Ron, saying, you were always second best, you were, always in last place. And one of the things that it does is it has these images of Harry and Hermione basically saying, we were happy when you left, and we were much better off without you. And Hermione's saying things, because at this point you know that Ron and Hermione, while they're not officially together, they're everything but, you know. And so this evil version of her is saying, you know, how could I possibly look at you when I've got Harry Potter right here and all this other stuff, and just horrible, horrible things. And the movie takes it a little step further.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
That was a little out there.
But I do have to agree, because I've heard some people complain about that, but a teenage boy's mind would go there.
This is true.
Okay? You know, so it's not completely out of left field. It's just a little bit more extreme than what we were expecting. And so the whole time, the real Harry is down there saying, come on, you gotta kill it. You gotta do this. And Ron brings the sword down, and for a second, Harry thinks that he's actually gonna, like, stab him with it. But he breaks the Horcrux, everything stops, and everything goes back to normal. And there's this really beautiful moment where Harry tells Ron, because Ron is just a mess. And poor boy. I really feel bad for Ron, because you know that all of those things that the Horcrux were saying, that's all stuff that was coming from Ron. That's deep down what he's worried about, what he's afraid of, how he feels sometimes. Oh, poor boy. I just want to hug him. But Harry tells him, especially in regards to Hermione, he was like, no, she cried for a week while you were gone. And she's like a sister to me, and I love her like my sister, and I guess she feels the same way about me, but that's it. She's my sister. That's it. And they hug, and it's all, like, sweet and wonderful for just a few minutes, and then they go back to the tent, and Harry's kind of like, hey, look who's here. And Hermione looks over and proceeds to beat the crap out of Ron.
Which I thought was kind of funny and appropriate.
Oh, I would have done the same thing. You just feel like saying, okay, moment over.
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny. And eventually she starts accepting the fact that he's back, but she's not really quick to forgive him for everything. And then for a while, Ron cannot agree with Hermione fast enough.
Yeah, everything she says he thinks is a wonderful idea.
Which was so funny. Oh, it's and again, it's something that a teenage boy would try and do when he's trying to get out of the doghouse. But
yes,
they decide, after a lot of discussion, to figure out what that symbol means, because they keep coming back to it, that it means something important. So they decide to go and visit Xenophilius Lovegood, because he was wearing it, so he must have some idea what it represents and what it means. So they go there, and that's where you finally find out what the title of the book means. And he says that the symbol, which is a triangle with a circle inside it and then a line going down the middle, and it's the symbol of the Deathly Hallows. And they read this story, The Tale of the Three Brothers, which I thought was beautifully done in the movie.
It really was. I really liked the way they did that. And I was afraid that I wouldn't, but I thought, and I love the little animation they did to go with it.
Yes, I mean, because you basically have Hermione narrating the entire thing, and pretty much word for word. And it's this whole very stylized, animated rendition of the story, and it's beautiful. But these three brothers, they meet Death on a bridge, and the Death says that he will give them something for being powerful wizards. So the oldest brother asks for an unbeatable wand, and he receives the Elder Wand. And the second brother asks for something that will bring back the dead, and he receives the stone called the Resurrection Stone. And the youngest brother asks for, he asks for, I don't remember exactly how he put it, but he ends up with an invisibility cloak.
A way to hide from death.
Okay, that's what it is.
or
Yeah.
something.
And so the older brother, he goes and he's boasting about he has this wonderful, unbeatable wand, and he, provokes some fights and everything else. But what happens is that he gets stabbed in the back while he's sleeping, and so death won that round. And then the second brother uses the resurrection stone to bring back this girl that he had been in love with, and but she wasn't really there. She was kind of a ghost, but kind of not, and she was desperately unhappy. And so the brother killed himself because he couldn't live like that with her, and so death won that round. But the youngest brother uh, was, apparently a good person, at least not quite as bad as his other brothers, but uh, he lives to be a ripe old age, and death never finds him until eventually he takes the cloak and passes it off to his son, and then is ready to die at the end of his nice, long, happy life.
Right.
So, as they're talking about this, they're realizing that invisibility cloak that they keep talking about sounds an awful lot like the one that Harry's got.
Yeah. Because they're permanent. They never lose their ability to be invisible, and you can't remove the charm from them or whatever. Yeah. And they're all like, Harry, yours is old. It was your father's, and it's never not worked. Yeah. So, I mean, yours is a true invisibility cloak. And the whole time, Hermione is just like, no, they're not real. There's no such thing. There's no death stick. There's no Hallows.
Right.
She just doesn't want to believe.
Well, she's a realist. But you find out a couple of things while they're there, because the whole time they're waiting for Luna to come back because she's fishing or something.
Yeah, she's supposed to be catching plimpies.
Yeah. And you're waiting for her to come back, but then you realize that her bedroom doesn't look like she's been there for a long time. Everything's dusty, and they kind of come to the realization that Luna's not there and hasn't been there. And Xenophilius tells them that Luna's been captured because they don't like what stories he was printing in the Quibbler, because he was a big Harry Potter supporter. And so they've captured Luna. So he's actually alerted the Death Eaters, and they're on their way.
Yep.
Which, see, I understand why he did it. It doesn't mean I have to like it, but Luna's all he has. So you can kind of understand why he did that, but still, it was not a good thing to do.
No. I mean, that's his daughter. His wife is dead, and he loves Luna. Right. But still, this is Harry Potter, and if you turn Harry Potter over to the Death Eaters, then getting your daughter back's not gonna matter because you're all gonna be dead.
It's a tough situation. It really is. It's horrible, but they get Hermione shoots Harry in the face with some spell to try and do something to disguise him.
No. That's not now. Now they get away. That's not until they're in the forest and get picked up by the Snatchers.
Okay, right. They get away there, and then but it's soon after that they get captured by the Snatchers, though, right? Yeah. That's what I thought. So I know eventually they end up at Malfoy Manor.
Well, they get away from there and get back in their tent and everything, and then Harry says Voldemort's name, which has a trace on it.
Yeah, which Ron had told them when he came back. He said that his name had a trace on it, and that's how the Death Eaters were able to find them. And Harry has gotten so used to using Voldemort's name, and nobody else really in the wizarding world does, because they're still scared of him. And so, yeah, that's how they get caught. You're right. I'd forgotten that part in the middle there. But they end up getting taken to Malfoy Manor. And this is another kind of character building moment, because they're looking at these three kids, and they know that Harry is traveling with a Weasley and a Mudblood girl. So they're trying to decide whether these people are who they say they are, and they're trying, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are trying to say they're other people. But they bring Draco in and ask him to verify who. First, they tell him to look at Harry, but Harry's features have been so distorted by whatever it is that Hermione did to him that he can't. Nobody can be completely sure whether it's him or not. But there's sort of a kind of a mark on his forehead that looks like it might be a scar, so they're kind of going on that. But then they're showing the other two to Draco and trying to get Draco to say whether or not that's them. And you know for a fact that Draco knew who they were.
Well, yeah, because he knew Ron and Hermione, and he knew if that was Ron and Hermione that was Harry.
But he would never say, yes, it's definitely them. He kept hedging and kind of not wanting to commit to one answer or not. And I think I just got the impression that Draco is so far over his head at this point, and all of those things that he used to say and do at Hogwarts. I mean, Hogwarts was safe, and he could say whatever he wanted, and he might get in trouble or he might get detention if it wasn't the end of the world. But now, becoming a Death Eater and being in that society, he realizes it's really not what he wanted.
Right.
And he's having to do things that he doesn't want to do. And this was kind of proof of that, because he could have very easily said, yeah, that's definitely Hermione Granger and that's definitely Ron Weasley, because he recognized them. You know he did. But he wouldn't say it. He wouldn't say for sure. He wouldn't turn them in. And that meant something.
Yeah, I think he finally realized that, maybe Voldemort really was evil and maybe Harry really was their best chance.
Yeah, I mean, even if
get out of this.
Yeah, and even if he was still a bigot and believed in, that purebloods were better than everybody else or whatever, I think he was starting to realize that even if he felt that way, that Voldemort's idea of things was not really the way to do this.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say that you don't like certain people. It's another thing to be like on the front lines and being forced to torture people and do other unspeakable acts. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to actually be faced with the reality. And he's getting a big dose of reality over the past two books, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there were several times, I mean, he's a jerk, but I felt really bad for him. But Harry and Ron get thrown in the basement, and they keep Hermione with them for questioning, and Bellatrix is involved, so you know that it's going to be bad. And they can hear her screaming, and that they're trying to say, she's trying to explain, come up with any kind of story, because they have the Sword of Gryffindor. And once Bellatrix sees that, she loses her mind. She's like, where did you get that? How do you have it? And she's using the Cruciatus curse on her, and she keeps saying, that was safe in my vault. How did you come by it? I don't know how you got it. I don't know how you got in my vault, but you can... And she's telling the Malfoys, you cannot call the Dark Lord right now, because if he sees this, we are all dead. And something's going on. You're not sure exactly what yet. But Harry and Ron, in the basement, they come across Luna, that's where she's being kept, and Mr. Ollivander, and a goblin.
Griphook.
And Hermione tries to say that the sword is a copy, that it's just a fake, and they found it, which isn't entirely untrue. They did find it, but they decide to bring up the goblin and he can verify it, so Harry's like, tell him it's fake. Don't tell him it's real, tell him it's fake. And Griphook agrees.
Practically.
Yeah, and Griphook agrees, and they're able to, let's see, they send Wormtail down there to check on things, because they, I know why. Everything's kind of getting mixed up. Dobby shows up. Right. And they're like, where the heck did Dobby come from? Because...
Well, Harry had that piece of a mirror, and he's like, help us, and then Dobby shows up.
Mm-hmm. Because it's a two-way mirror that Sirius had, and it got broken, but Harry still has a piece of it, and he keeps seeing these blue eyes looking back at him every once in a while. And he keeps thinking that they look like Dumbledore's eyes, which he thinks is weird. But he sees them and he's like, we need help. And that's when Dobby shows up. And Dobby takes Luna and Mr. Ollivander. Oh, is Dean Thomas there too? That's right.
Yes.
He got caught as well. But the Dobby takes them to Bill and Flora's house, and apparating, of course, makes a lot of noise. And so they send Wormtail down. And this was something that was cut from the movie, which I was kind of sad about. Not because I really wanted to see it, because it's kind of gross, but it was just kind of a fitting end for this character. But Wormtail comes down there, and Harry and Ron kind of ambush him. And Wormtail's fighting, and he's trying to strangle Harry. And Harry's saying, I saved your life, you owe me. And this triggers some kind of thing with the life debt that they had, but the magic silver hand that Voldemort had given him ends up turning on its owner, and Wormtail ends up strangling himself. Ew.
Yeah. Yeah, that was rather
Gross.
creepy and disturbing. But,
Yeah.
fitting, like
it was.
you said.
And like I said, I didn't want to see it, but it was just a fitting end for that character. And I don't think we ever found out what happened to him in the movie. I think they stunned him, but I don't think they killed him.
Yeah. Yeah, they stunned him and left him.
So for all we know, he's still alive and kicking around somewhere. But Harry and Ron run upstairs. They are able to rescue Hermione, and Dobby comes back and apparates them all out. But as they're apparating, Bellatrix has this little silver knife, and she throws it at him. It follows them through the apparating and hits Dobby right in the chest. This was so sad.
It really was. I mean, it was sadder in the books, I think, than in the movie, because in the book, Dobby had been around in so many of the other books.
Yeah, you got to know him better.
But in this movie, he was only in, the second one and this one?
Yeah, that was it.
So you really didn't know Dobby.
No, and they did give him a little bit more scenes in this movie because he was kind of hanging out with Creature for a while.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough for you to... I mean, his death was still sad, and it was still a shock because of all of the creatures that you're going to kill Dobby? I mean, really? That was as bad as Hedwig. But it's like all the small, helpless ones. Let's kill them first. What? No.
It really was.
Really? But, I mean, it was more shocking in the book, like you said, because we knew him so much better. And the fact that they made it to Shell Cottage and they were safe, except for Dobby. And Harry decides that he wants to bury him and he wants to dig the grave with his own hands. And, it was so... There was such a hopeless feeling. Because where you have no idea where to go at this point. Hey guys, this is Denise. As we were recording this episode, we kind of started realizing we were running way, way long. So towards the end of our nearly 3-hour recording session, we had this conversation.
You're going to have to cut some of this
stuff.
Well,
you know what? Maybe we could cut it into 2 episodes like they did with the movie.
Well, I was going to say, since we have that week where we're not going to have an episode, we could split this into 2.
We might be able to do that.
When you get in there and look, because, since we are going to have that week where there's nothing, we could just do the second half of this, and then we don't skip a week.
Yeah. Okay. I'm liking this idea. Okay. That might be what we do. So, we made the same conclusion that the folks who made the movies did. This needed to be cut into 2 separate episodes. So you will hear the rest of this episode next week. And until then, you can contact us at email, bibliophiles-podcast@gmail.com, or on Twitter at bibanonpodcast, or you can hit us up at our official website, which is www.bibliophiles-anonymous.com. So as always, thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye.